Good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Giacchetta, CTO and co-founder of VidOvation. I have two very special guests today on our webinar from Providius. Isn't that an amazing name? I love that name. It sounds so powerful. Greek god or a Roman god, right? We were talking about that. We're going to talk about how to fortify your media networks with analysis, IP telemetry, and cybersecurity. I'm sure we've all been in those places where the broadcast engineering team is pointing at IT is pointing at the broadcast engineering guys, the network and IT guys say the network is fine, the broadcast guys say the signal's not getting through, and what do we do from there, right? So you guys help solve that problem. I have Rodrick Smith, VP of Sales, and Jamie Horner, VP of Product Development and Marketing. So welcome, guys. I can't wait to learn more about Providius.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Good to be here.
Take it away.
All right. Yeah, so let's just jump in. We've produced some slides just to walk us through to make sure we cover all the material. So we're gonna do that, and we're also gonna take a look at the products live. So we've got them connected up to a live network so that we can take a look at some of the dashboards just to give some context. But please throw your questions into the chat. I think Jim and Fallon are going to help us triage some of the inbound questions if there are any. Yeah, and without further ado, we'll get started. I'm going to punch up our PowerPoint. Okay, away we go. So I'm going to let Rodrick get started on the intro, and then I'll do some of the more product-specific details as we get deeper into the slide deck.
All right. So hello, everyone. So just a little bit about the company itself, just to get started. So Providius is a Canadian company. We're actually based just outside of Toronto. About 25 of us, the majority in R&D and engineering, heavily focused on both network engineering and traditional broadcast engineering, which will become apparent as we get into the products themselves. Privately held, privately financed, and profitable. Of course, on to the next slide, Jamie. So we are focused primarily on network performance monitoring for media networks and IP traffic flow analysis, right? So we have two primary platforms that essentially analyze and, let's say, discover the network in real time using open protocols that the network switch manufacturers use themselves, so as not to impair the proper functioning of the network. And this was done in partnership with the major network switch manufacturers themselves. And we extract real-time telemetry from those switches and also analyze the media and apply, let's say, a cyber risk analysis to the actual network itself. This is somewhat unique to the industry. I think there's many different tool sets that you can find either in traditional broadcast or in, say, foundational network IT engineering that are kind of specific to their relevant domains, but nothing really that combines the two in a way that is specific to media networks themselves. And that's where we come in. So we analyze the network, but we do so in a way that's specific to the commonalities of media networks. So let's say, time sensitive multicast networks, synchronous PTP networks, et cetera. We have a number of different dashboards that get directly to the root of these types of specific characteristics that essentially enable us to rapidly detect and isolate faults on media networks, right? And we do this to eliminate the blind spots that Jim mentioned earlier. It's quite common when you have, let's say, a mix of disciplines and technologies deployed for media networks, such as, COTS network IT switches used with broadcast media, that you'll have kind of disparate, let's say, disciplines, domains of expertise that have to come together to manage these networks. But up until now, there was really a common tool that was missing in the industry, and that actually kind of was the genesis of our partnership with the likes of, so let's say, Cisco and Arista, for example, that we'll talk about later, was that they essentially, in close collaboration with them, they came to us and said, look, we have our tools, but they're really generic IT tools. We don't have anything that's really specific to the common issues that are found in media networks. And that was kind of foundational in the way not only that we get the telemetry data from the switches, but also the type of dashboards that you find in our products that are really specific to media networks that allow you to get to the root of the problem very quickly, right? And this essentially eliminates the finger pointing between the different divisions because the software is designed to be shared among operations, broadcast media engineering, and IT engineering. It is read-only, so there's no danger with respect to who has access to the system. You know, all of the powerful capabilities that you would find in a network IT manufacturer's toolset, typically closely guarded by those who are trained to use it for good reason. This allows even operators to have visibility into the network, to know what's happening in real time, and to quickly identify problems. So when something does occur, they know almost immediately if it's just a broadcast related issue, maybe a vendor compatibility issue or improper configuration, or something specific to the network itself. But when they call for help, they know exactly who to call and what the issue is. So it gets right to the root of the problem. And then we also provide an enhanced level of security analysis and risk evaluation for the networks themselves. And we do this in a way that is, let's say, sensitive to media networks themselves. So typically, cybersecurity software that you find in the industry either requires an agent to be installed on devices, which is not practical or many times possible in media devices, or when they do a port enumeration scan, it's done in a way that is, let's say, too aggressive and can provoke problems or, you know, that causes the devices to crash. So we do this in a way that is sensitive to those devices, that allows us to create a scorecard that allows everybody involved to know how the devices are configured, what ports are open, commonly associated risks and recommendations, so that you can arrive at a target implementation guide and that every device that's installed in the network has a known configuration that has been approved and meets your cyber hygiene or cybersecurity risk needs. So next slide, Jamie. So who do we work with? You know, over the past 10 years of our existence, we've amassed a pretty considerable and impressive install base, and we work with some of the biggest names in the industry. I won't name drop, but certainly feel free to reach out to Jim or myself, and we can certainly, you know, offline tell you about all the wonderful customers we work with. But just to kind of put some domain space on them, we work with some of the largest sports production and some very innovative customers doing some very innovative work around sports production and how media is consumed. Certainly, you know, live production, predominantly 2110, media networks, IPTV. We have some very large news production customers. We've worked with a number of stadium and venue customers, both in the United States as well as overseas. Large enterprise customers and enterprise networks. You know, we get into large, you know, government entities, corporate financials. One of our biggest customers is actually a streaming media division of a very large, well-known company that essentially has thousands of flows under analysis under our IP flow, traffic flow monitoring solution. The trucks and OB vans, we have a wide deployment on live production OB vans globally. I'll mention Game Creek because we have a public press release with them that we also touch in a little later in the presentation. They have 9 IP OB vans deployed with our software in use for some of the world's, you know, biggest and most kind of, let's say, mission critical and demanding live sporting events. 2 of their OB vans with our software were deployed for the Super Bowl most recently. We also have our software deployed for mission critical contribution networks for 2 large customers, let's say one in Brazil and one in Germany, without naming them specifically. Live events and government, as I mentioned as well. Next slide, please. So getting specific to some of our partners, Beck TV, a very well-known integrator in the US that does a lot of very important and large projects, both for some broadcast networks and news production customers, as well as quite prominently in the stadiums and venue space. They use our software not only as an advantage to the customer, so that day 2, the customer who maybe, you know, having their first experience with COTS network infrastructure for 2110 and live production in their mission critical environment, but they use it themselves as a deployment tool. So Beck TV actually uses our software to go in and help make them quicker in terms of getting the network configured correctly, doing a proper inventory, making sure that everything is essentially as it should be. And then they use this as let's say, a knowledge transfer tool to help educate the customer and then leave it in their hands so that day 2, the customer has a tool that they can use that gives them visibility into the network, whereas in many times, certainly staffing in the stadium and venues is a challenge with respect to having that mix of like a senior broadcast engineer plus, you know, IT network engineering. So this is something that essentially Beck uses to ensure that they themselves are successful in terms of the deployment of their projects, and then makes a happy customer day two, so that they have all the adequate tools that they need to manage this new system that they've been given. Next slide, please. Game Creek, as I mentioned as well. So Game Creek, you know, synonymous with the world's most important sporting events. Very innovative in terms of their use of, let's say, IP, video over IP 2110. They have, like I said, 9 trucks with our software deployed, some of the biggest, let's say, tier 1 production trucks, used most recently at the Super Bowl. So they use our software both for the network visibility, but also for the, let's say, the signal flow analysis and PTP related issues. We speak with them often, and they've been quite complimentary in saying that the software is something they call a daily driver. It's something that they constantly use, that they're always using. PGA Masters tournament last year, they used it in their first productions with 4K. So, you know, a key customer to ours that really depends on our software to help them, you know, drive innovation forward and manage this complex infrastructure that they have. Next slide. Some of our technical partners. So, as I mentioned previously, Arista and Cisco were really foundational in developing the dashboards and the methods with which we extract the real-time telemetry from the switches. They've been great partners to us over the years. You know, they're quite prominent in the tier 1 2110 space, and really help collaborate with respect to roadmap and things that we can do to add value to our customers that are, let's say, gaps in what they offer with respect to kind of traditional network IT tools. And over the years, of course, we've also developed some additional partnerships. So Extreme and Netgear, quite common in the corporate AV over IP space, you know, large corporate financials and corporate enterprise, et cetera. With Netgear also making a move into 2110 COTS infrastructure as well. And Juniper, both, you know, commonly known as, let's say, a network backbone for the WAN networks, but also with the media fabric for 2110 as well. So, you know, great collaborations and partnerships. And the way that we extract the telemetry, essentially by open standards, and each manufacturer, let's say, has their flavor, but we work closely with them to make sure it's done correctly. We're not doing this from the outside looking in. We're not trying to, you know, crack the box and see how we can get it. We work hand in hand with the manufacturers to do it in the way that they do it themselves. Next slide. And so now to get into some more product-specific information, I'll turn it over to Jamie.
Perfect. Thanks, Rodrick. Yeah, as Rodrick's pointed out, we have 2 major platforms at Providius. The first mentioned here is our MVRT software. This is the network visualization and real-time telemetry product. Categorically, this would fit into the network performance monitoring category of solutions for the monitoring of networks. Obviously, Providius's secret sauce is a blend of both the network performance metrics as well as collecting data from the different broadcast elements or media elements to blend those 2 together to create a cross-section of the network where we look at some of the principal IT fundamental information, we look at some of the media information. It's all presented in a single dashboard. So it does really hyper-focus in on networking and the transportation of media and timing on those networks. I think the common question we would normally hear from sort of the IT side is why do we need a unique set of tools? And I think Rodrick's touched on this a little bit already. You know, IT has been built sort of on a principle of about a 95% rule. Sort of if everything's working at 95%, if you have about 5% sort of loss of packets throughout the network due to latency, due to bandwidth, et cetera, that's good enough. You know, retransmission will take care of the rest. Unfortunately, when it comes to media, that 5% is in fact pretty critical and actually becomes fatal when it comes to audio and video and timing on a network. So that's really where Providius focuses in on, is to ensure the uptime, the stability and reliability of the network, looking for those critical failures before they spiral into off-air or, you know, incidents or outages, incidents that that could have been avoided should you have had some greater insight into the performance of the network ahead of time. So we're going to talk about MVRT in a couple slides. We also have the Broadcast Media Guard, or BMG. This is our media analysis platform. And we're going to go into some more detail on this product as well. The partnership between the two, although they are two standalone platforms, they absolutely can be deployed unique separately for different projects. We a lot of times do jointly deploy both products because they complement each other so well, and they do create a full 360-degree view of the environment, where NVRT is focused on the network and network performance. BMG is focused on the media and looking at the media specific details, looking for faults, trying to find any kind of impairments that may be affecting quality of service of a particular media component, video, audio, or data within a media environment. So the two platforms, like I said, can absolutely stand alone, or they can be deployed in a partnership where the information really becomes even richer. You get a much better total view of your environment. So starting with NVRT, just to discuss it, just to kind of quickly overview its functionality and its sort of role. So in media environments where uninterrupted delivery is paramount, NVRT plays a crucial role in ensuring network resiliency. By identifying and prioritizing critical network elements, NVRT fortifies the network against potential failures and disruptions. So its key features are real-time issue detection, as I just mentioned. So it's using information or telemetry data from the network switches. So each network switch within a media environment, the NVRT is in communications with, and it's collecting the metrics data from those switches to develop insight into not only the physical properties of the network, but also the functional or performance details of the network, like the bandwidth on each of the interfaces, any kind of packet loss, presentation of PTP, the timing of PTP, as well as any kind of disconnects in the network from the standpoint of devices or software that are joining or leaving the network at any point. It develops insight into the physical layer. We're going to look at this in a little more detail. So it builds up network maps. It creates a comprehensive table of all the media services. So it's able to acquire the different route tables from each of the switches, and it builds a sort of global view of all of those media resources so that you understand where the media is originating from, who the consumers are, how many hops it's taking across the network, which interfaces is that media touching, so that you can map and trace those media services in real time. NVRT can be run in a headless mode where it's evaluating these details. It can generate notifications and alerts that you can customize, so you can create a sequence and series of what you want to be notified about and how critical it is to the operation. So we can run in that mode. And then there are the dashboards that you can then log into the product using a web browser, and you can then do a deeper dive. So we really look at NVRT as sort of having two roles. It helps out in operations where it sort of provides that continuous surveillance of the network and feedback to identify faults or problems. So this kind of brings awareness and it kind of brings attention to potential issues that might be going on within the network that could result eventually in some type of incident with some media on the network. And then the tools can be used by engineering for them to step in to then go in and do a deeper dive and a deeper investigation into what exactly is going on. As the NVRT is logging a lot of information, it's retaining that information for up to 30 days so that you can go in and do some triaging, look at some specific details, look at some timing characteristics to see when these events occur. So it is quite a powerful platform that can be used by different organizations within a broadcaster media environment. So just quickly highlighting some application notes here. NVRT is actually quite widely deployed. A lot of projects that we are involved in are 2110 projects. 2110 being, I guess, the sort of the latest generation of sort of large uncompressed media routing. We also work in 2022-6. And a lot of the 2110 environments are -7, or the 2022-6s are also -7. So the red-blue style networks where MVRT is really powerful in that it provides clear insight into the construct of the red and blue network, especially leaf spine, understanding the connectivity and relationship, and then being able to obtain all of the routes and the media that is on the network. We're also able to correlate that media, those multicast services, with the broadcast control system, as well as with NMOS registration and with the orchestration layer. So it's able to collect and bring forward a lot of insight regarding not only the network's performance, but also how that interacts or intersects with the control system and the orchestration layer. So things like setting up STP files, checking to see, do bandwidths, match what's expected based on the characteristics or registration. And so those are a lot of really intimate details that NVRT gets into to help spot problems that may cause congestion or oversubscriptions in the network. So it can be really, really powerful in these types of environments, in addition to tracking the presence of PTP and the boundary clock in the clock chain as well. So understanding and developing what the boundary clocks, who the boundary clocks are, and if they're locked or unlocked to the grandmaster. So there's a lot of very specific features and functionality built into MVRT that really, really complements a 2110 environment. So there's quite a bit of capabilities there in the platform. So just some dashboards that we have in the slides just to highlight some of the functions that it provides. So like I mentioned, it is able to determine in real time the physical properties and layout of the network. So it constructs a real map of, or a topology of the network. And it is real time. So as things connect and disconnect from the network, the MVRT will automatically add or remove those devices from the network topology, and then create a notification as well that those things have occurred, so that you can track those types of physical changes. It's able to acquire route tables from the switches, so it can build up a comprehensive view of all of the multicast services. And it can also provide an overview showing the exact path that a specific multicast is taking on a network. So it can track from the originating point, from the transmit point, all the way through to the receivers. And you can see and confirm how many receivers are on the network are consuming a particular multicast. And that also helps you correlate that back to the broadcast control system, where you can check to see if these two things are synchronous or not. As Rodrick mentioned in the opening, we've started to build in some functionality into the platform that starts to touch on some of the cyber concerns. So as we are transitioning to IP, we're utilizing network infrastructure within a media environment. That does increase the potential for cyber risk, the potential that now that everything is on the network, including the media itself, that there is potential for tampering, for disruption from a cybersecurity point of view. So that we've started bringing this functionality into the product. One of the features that we've developed is the ability to evaluate the risk of a particular device from a network characteristics point of view. So we're looking at how many open ports each one of the elements on the network is using for communication. So that's helping us characterize whether this device has a low risk profile or a high risk profile, and whether or not the device is using network ports that would be considered higher vulnerability. So things that perhaps aren't encrypted, that are in the clear, that don't use passwords, things that would allow someone to easily tamper with the device. The MVRT is able to help us check for that and spot those types of risk vulnerabilities, and it presents that up in a nice, clear and concise way, so that we're made aware of what's going on. And part of a cybersecurity deployment or a program is really about visibility. It's just about creating insight and awareness, and that's really a pretty fundamental piece to helping solve some of the cyber challenges. So that's a part of one of the features that MVRT offers that does help it play that role from a security point of view. And I mentioned tracking PTP, so we have some dedicated dashboards that allow MVRT to continuously track not only that the switches are locked to PTP, but also to find if it's on the primary grandmaster or the backup, as well as tracking the timing and the mean time delay. So making sure that the boundary clocks are still remaining accurate and that they're not drifting in time, which could cause some alignment issues or phasing issues for any of the devices using PTP as a reference point. And then, like mentioned before, MVRT is used in a lot of different networks, not just 2110. It's deployed wherever really media is present. So that could be anywhere from large distribution networks to streaming networks to IPTV, digital signage. The list goes on. So there's a lot of variety of networks where the MVRT has been deployed, and it provides a lot of very useful insight in performance metrics. But this is also where we start factoring in the BMG. So the BMG's role is to analyze the media services on these networks. So in addition to insight into the performance of the network, we're also able to look at the media itself. And in some regards, BMG may come first in terms of the whole chicken and egg conversation. So perhaps you wanted to use BMG to analyze the media services. So its role would be to acquire however many media services you have on a network and continuously analyze those services looking for faults. And it looks at a lot of different properties. It looks at timing, it looks at packet structure, it looks at transport stream health, it looks for synchronization, it looks at the essence, it decodes the video, the audio, the ancillary data services, it looks at compliancy information. So it does a lot of inspection, a lot of studying of the different media services that it's acquired. And from there, it would develop whether or not there's a fault. And perhaps at that point, if we detect faults in our media service, that we would turn to MVRT to determine, is this a network-related issue or is this coming from somewhere else? And so, like I mentioned, the two products definitely are very complementary. So key features of the BMG, the media analyzer, is its ability to monitor hundreds of services through a single instance. So one BMG installed on, say, one COTS server hardware device can subscribe and retrieve hundreds of services at the same time and analyze those services concurrently. And it could be a mixture of service types. It could be compressed domain, it could be uncompressed. We deal with MPEG-2 TS, we deal with NDI, we can deal with IPMX, we can deal with obviously 2110 as we talked about, HLS streaming services as well, MPEG-2, H.64, HEVC, JPEG 2000, JPEG XS. So really the list goes on. It's obviously a very flexible platform, and the really nice feature of the product is its capability to look at those different services simultaneously. So a single BMG could be acquiring some uncompressed content at the same time acquiring some compressed content and doing an evaluation on them at the same time. So which makes it quite flexible in its use cases. So just some quick application notes here on the BMG. The BMG's really, it is a software application. It can be deployed on COTS hardware. It can be deployed on VM. It can be deployed in the cloud as well. So we also have a cloud instance that can be utilized or deployed. In any of those three cases, it really is up to the hardware it's been deployed on. For instance, on a COTS server hardware platform, you could have multiple network interface cards, and the BMG can utilize each one of those network interface cards to acquire media from different networks. So in this example, we're looking at a single BMG acquiring media from both the red side network, the blue side network, and as well as a purple network. And this might be the example of some uncompressed content from the red and blue, and then some compressed content perhaps off the purple. One instance, one deployment of BMG will be able to handle those three different networks at the same time. In terms of network interface, we work with some off-the-shelf COTS network interface cards for uncompressed, and we can deploy those network interface cards with up to 100 gigabits per second per interface. So you can acquire quite a large bandwidth of media per network interface, and the BMG can analyze all those for us. So a couple of quick dashboards. Like I mentioned, we can definitely jump over to the live demo as well to see these with some moving elements, but just to highlight them here. So these are the two dashboards at the BMG, the common dashboards that you would normally find in the BMG. Again, like MVRT, it's running headlessly. It's acquiring these services. It's continuously analyzing them. It's going to generate notifications, whether it's email, output to Slack, syslog, SNMP. So it'll send out notifications if it does detect a problem. It can notify NVRT, of course. And this is where perhaps then an engineering team, an engineering member might log in, and they would use then these dashboards to take a closer look at what's going on. The upper dashboard, this is an overview page. Every service that's being monitored is pinned up on this page. So this is a quick heads up of all the media services. This will help us identify quickly if there's any faults occurring in these services, as we'd see a flashing border, a warning or a highlight there that would tell us, okay, we have a service that's got a fault with it. The dashboard here at the bottom, this is where we're taking a deep dive into one of the media services. So this is where we chosen to open up that media service, and we're now doing a deep dive. We're looking at these widgets that each one of them is a dedicated measurement, which is measuring the media service, and it's actually recording the result, and it's storing those results up to 30 days. So we can go back up to 30 days and look for things like RTP packet loss or MPEG-2 transport stream violations. It also obviously is analyzing the essence, so it's looking for frozen black, missing video. It's looking at audio levels, audio too high, too low. It's also able to measure audio loudness, so it can even do an LKFS measurement as well. In addition to looking at the data services, so it can be monitoring SCSI triggers and logging those. It can be looking at your captioning to make sure that's present if you're looking for a compliance product to confirm compliance, making sure that you have those elements in place. So it does a lot of versatility. There are a lot of things it's measuring and studying. So you have this notifications capability, you have this fault notifications, and then you also have the ability to triage. So it's more than just alarming and errors. It's also about diagnosing, triaging, and eventually figuring out the root cause of the issue. And that's really where BMG is quite powerful. So a couple more just application notes. This is just sort of showcasing the blend of different networks that it can operate on and the different types of services it can operate on. Again, as I already mentioned, uncompressed, compressed, a variety of different services. We just recently introduced, in fact, we introduced the BMG Lite at the beginning of the year. BMG Lite is the more compact version of the BMG Pro. So we found that there are customers who don't necessarily need 200 or plus services of monitoring simultaneously, don't need all that horsepower. So we've come out with the BMG Lite. The BMG Lite is meant to, be used in smaller media networks where there's fewer network services that need to be monitored, so that there's something that more compact would fit the bill. So this is a more compact, more economical version of our BMG Pro. And we end up using the BMG Lite targeted to things like smaller production setups, like an NDI or IPMX style setup, where fewer services maybe compared to a bigger 2110 style network. We're also seeing it used in IPTV, digital signage networks, where clients are looking to just, beyond just sort of presence of the IPTV elements, they really want to understand all the channel bouquet. Are there any issues? Are there any faults in the system? Before those, those services, either there's some quality of service impairment that's, causing a visual or audible breakup in the signal. This would allow you to catch and detect those issues far before someone detects them visually within, within whatever project it is, whether it's in a venue or within a corporate, IPTV, or within a, say, airport, etc. This just is a nice centralized way of monitoring all these. You don't need a full control room. You can do it all with a single box, essentially, using the BMG Lite. Okay. At this point, I was going to just do a quick highlight of the products through a live demonstration. We're just going to open up some of the similar dashboards just to show them kind of moving and just to give an idea of what the products look like live. But I thought I'd take a break just before I do that. If there are questions inbound, I'm not really paying attention to the chat. So if there were questions thrown up there.
Well, yeah, the chat, no questions on the chat, but I got like a whole page full.
Okay. Great.
So similar to Beck TV,
Yes.
we do a lot of IPTV solutions from a networking standpoint. Relatively simple. These are not SMPTE 2110. We're typically we have like over-the-air TV tuners, a COM 3000 bringing in direct TV. Most of the traffic is, if not all the traffic, is multicast UDP, MPEG-2 or H.264. And I'll give you some scenarios. Now, I would never let one of my engineers touch a customer's switch, and most customers would never let a vendor mess with their switch either. If a customer wants you to play with their switch, I'd be very scared. So I've mentioned you guys to some account, some deployments where we've had some mysterious networking issues. And it's a little bit of finger pointing. You know, the customer is tired of VidOvation and our team saying it's the network and the customer and their network people. And, you know, neither side has definitive proof where the problem is. And so it's not fair to point fingers at people unless you have all the smoking gun. So I'll give you a couple of scenarios. So we one brand of encoder, I won't mention names, IGMP, it's enabled, it just won't propagate. It'll reach the first hop, but then if I'll give you an example. So it's a relatively flat network, only 3 hops to a TV. We plug VLC, a PC with VLC player or TS reader, Wireshark. We bring up the TV channel in VLC player, it plays fine. When we put the set-top box in and it requests that particular encoder's feed, we can see in Wireshark the IGMP request going, but we're not sure what's happening, why it's not working. Could you shed light into what's happening in that scenario? Why that set-top box cannot join that particular encoder stream? Or am I getting too into the weeds?
Yeah, it's a very, very specific question.
Yeah. But I mean, so basically, you know, we're obviously there's some sort of an IGMP problem. You know, maybe we're all not on the, you know, there's version 1, 2, and 3. Maybe we're not on the right version, or there's some switch or some asset. I can't double check the customer's switch to make sure we're all on version 2. So how would you help kind of troubleshoot maybe at a higher level, like a multicast issue? Would you lend visibility? You could see the stream where it's stopping.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, what you can use MVRT to do is to confirm what the network switches are routing or switching, right? Depending on the topology. In this case, it sounds like routing. So, if you don't see in the MVRT's dashboard the multicast, then you can conclude that the multicast was not carried out by the network switch. So, you know, if you have a 3-layer switch or 3 switches, sorry, in a stack, so you have this, you know, 3 hops.
Yeah.
You can definitely check. In fact, why don't we just take a look at that while we're talking.
Cool.
So I'm just going to open up the dashboard here. So we're just jumping into MVRT. This is a topology dashboard. So this is, like I mentioned, it's studying the network and determining exactly the network layout and all the connectivity. If I was to go to one of my switches and look at its route table, right? So again, you don't need to be an expert in IT. You don't need to understand how to use CLI. You don't need any training here. I'm just using MVRT. it provides effectively a non-vendor specific dashboard. So it doesn't matter what manufacturer switch you have, the presentation layer is always going to look the same. This is showing me my multicasts that are inbound into the switch. It's giving me a label. So this could be a label that I've statically assigned, or I can, MVRT can actually source this label from a broadcast control system. It tells me which device is generating the multicast, which interface on the switch it's connected to, and then where that multicast is being routed or forwarded to. So this is a view of, in this case, the specific switch we're looking at. But if I was to go back to the table and I knew exactly either the multicast group address or the static name, I can do a full path trace to see that multicast, where the sender is, where it's connected, how many switches it's going through, and then who subsequently is the recipient or receiver of that. So Jim, in your scenario, if, for instance, instead of replacing your VLC session, but putting the set-top box perhaps on another port, both of them making the join request, what I would expect to see is the sender, the multiple hops, and then I would expect to see both recipients showing the multicast has been successfully delivered. If I'm only seeing one of those, but it does successfully make it all the way through the three, switch hops, at least I know that the multicast is being routed by the switch. That then I'm looking at, okay, what's going on in the set-top box? Is there incompatibility, as you mentioned?
Yeah, yeah.
The switch, however, it's telling me where this multicast is forwarded according to the IGMP join request. So when that join request comes in, it looks at the multicast route table. It says, okay, I have this. I'm going to forward that to this interface from the requester. So if you're seeing, you may even see that it is sending it or forwarding it to the interface. It's now just a matter of the set-top box not recovering it correctly. And that could be where the breakdown is. But this would absolutely allow you to do a full diagnostics on the network, looking at it from the media point of view, making sure and confirming that the network is carrying out the route requests as you suspect or expect that it should. If you see that only the first switch joins the multicast and that there's no multicast forwarded on from that point, then now you're looking at switch configuration. So perhaps PIM isn't enabled between the switches. You're getting obviously into the weeds now. You're getting to more specific hardware network side setup, which would then obviously call in your IT department to help with, or sometimes even the manufacturers themselves might have to.
Yeah, or at least there's a smoking gun where to look, I don't like playing the blame game either. I'm always looking, let's solve the problem. I don't care which vendor's fault it is. It may be our fault, maybe the network's fault.
Exactly. So in this case, and I'll just finish this example, the MVRT is building us it's tracing the route, is building us a topology of that route. It also is bringing up a heads up table to show us the interface information for each path, each port or interface that multicast is crossing. This is also super beneficial. So I can check to see, are we oversubscribed on this interface? Perhaps the reasons the multicast isn't getting forwarded is that there's no bandwidth left on that interface for it to forward to. Maybe unbeknownst to you, there's a bunch of multicasts already flooding your network. You can't see that with the human eye. You can, but with MVRT, you can inspect for that type of detail. You can see if there's any errors also. So perhaps the switch is just dropping packets, right? It's just, you're losing like 50% of the packets, like we talked about, even 5% could be fatal. You might be seeing a disruption in the network itself that's causing, the multicast not to be joined successfully. If you're using SFPs, you can check the SFP values with MVRT quickly to see, am I in spec? Am I out of spec? Perhaps there's an issue there. If you really want to go and look, you can even go back and dig deep into the interface itself, look at any of the other multicasts that are actively on that interface, check out the timeline. You can look up to 30 days to see what the performance has been with this particular interface. Perhaps you're thinking, this was working yesterday, but today it's not. Maybe.
Well, that question comes up a lot. Like, why did this anomaly creep up? Things were working just fine for years. When did, Was it, I have no smoking gun. What did somebody push a firmware update to all the switches and something got changed? So at least if we had a timestamp of when it first started, that's a smoking gun. So I've mentioned you guys to some of these clients are like, hey, we need a tool like Providius. And they're like, well, we have SolarWinds, or we have other tools. Those are good tools. They're IT tools, but they're not media centric, right?
Correct.
Can you speak to that a little bit, like the differences between what you guys do and the tools IT departments may be using already?
Yeah, and in some cases it also comes down to the mechanisms for data collection. We were getting effectively real-time telemetry from a lot of the network switches, so we're getting extremely accurate information that's up to date. We're delving deep into the route tables of the switches. We're looking, at those media services specifically. We're correlating those with other systems, like we're putting in the mnemonics for the multicast groups addresses so that you can relate to something human relatable. So yeah, there's we're kind of marrying a bunch of different components and elements together, and kind of very much concentrating on the media, specifically the media services themselves as it's presented to the network. Another big element too is in synchronous networks in 2110 and 2022 and AS67 in Dante, you have the presence of PTP, and it's critical. It's a fundamental element of that media network, and it's critical in the success of that media network that PTP be present, that it be coherent, and that everyone has access to it, so that the services can remain synchronous. So MVRT again specifically looks at the performance and data from the switches in regards to PTP, ensuring that they're locked, identifying which interfaces they're leading on, checking to see what the delay and sync messages are and announcement messages that they're generating, making sure that the timing is accurate, that it's not wildly changing, that is going to cause problems as well. So there's a lot of functionality in MVRT that really, at least to my knowledge, you won't find in traditional IT softwares, just because it's elements and components that aren't commonplace
Yeah,
within an
yeah.
IT environment that you would really
Multicast
look.
video was not a thing when a lot of these network protocols were invented, right?
Yeah, not only is it not a thing, a lot of IT departments have policies against multicast. A
Yeah,
multicast
it's
could,
rare, but yeah, or at minimum they're afraid, and we have to educate them on the benefits of multicast. It puts less load on your network, et cetera, et cetera. Or it's like fear of the unknown. I'm not familiar with multicast, so I'm trained to just say no.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and one property of multicast that this could come up also in troubleshooting. One multicast element is the TTL, or the time to live values set.
Yes, yes.
So the switches decrement the TTL value each time they forward the multicast on. If your TTL values are set to 1, then in the scenario with 3 switches, then
Yeah, well, that's the first thing. Me and all my guys, that's our number. If the stream ain't propagating, go back to the source. Some vendors, the TTL by default is set to 1 out of the
right.
encoder. I'm like, what? Maybe it's just a safety mechanism. Like, let's set it to 1. They'll have to figure it out. Yeah.
Yes, no, totally. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so that's the MDRT quick overview. I wanted to also touch on the BMG. So just opening up another tab on my web browser. Should have said that from the beginning. So just using a standard web browser to access both MVRT and BMG, so which is really nice. It's a zero footprint architecture, meaning there's only the application, the MVRT or BMG. You don't need any client side software. You just need a web browser. So it is, effectively a modern environment in that regard. You can bring up these dashboards on your laptop, on a desktop, on a tablet. So super flexible. You can be viewing this, on the go. You can be viewing this through Wi-Fi. In the BMG's case, we've logged in. We're looking at the overview page. So I've set this up where in our lab, we've just acquired some of the services. Some of them are uncompressed 2110. Some of them are MPEG-2 transport stream. We've got some 2110-30 audio here, or sort of a AES67 variation here. Again, it could be a variety of media types. And you could quite literally have hundreds of services being monitored simultaneously. Now, not hundreds of uncompressed, because that would be a lot of bandwidth, but certainly a handful of uncompressed and a lot of compressed services at the same time, especially in the audio. You could do thousands of channels of audio. You can put this up in a control room environment, and this would be your kind of overview, kind of like a multi-viewer. In this case, we're not showing full frame rate. This is actually showing us some thumbnails, but it gives us a nice visual presentation so that we see what's going on and we see what media services are actively being analyzed and monitored. Now, for whatever reason, we've got quite a few alarms in our lab right now, so you can see these flashing boxes. I can actually focus on just the ones that are in fault by going into our penalty box mode, so you can see here. And now we're seeing the ones that are currently at fault, so those are the ones we'd want to focus in on. And at any point, I can just jump in, and this brings up the analytics page. And in here, I can start to do some deep dives into the functionality, some of the measurements that are being generated by this particular service, and we can really concentrate on some of the faults. So we're seeing some faulting information here, and we can dive deep into those details, whether it's packet telemetry. In this case, it's an MPEG-2 transport stream, so this would be more of an IPTV type of application. We're even looking at the structure of the transport stream itself. You can see we're even decoding the video up in the right-hand corner. So we're seeing a thumbnail, but we can definitely see this full frame rate if we wanted to within the web browser, which is really nice, especially with uncompressed, to be able to get that visual on it. You can listen to the audio through the web browser, super powerful as well. Again, a lot of cool functionality, and you're doing it remotely through a web browser. So you don't need to be chained to a specific location. You could be on the go, checking these things out. You could, if with the right access to a network, you could be doing it like I am today remotely through VPN. I could be at a Starbucks and looking at this information on my laptop while having a coffee. So super flexible. A lot of really detailed functionality. As you can see, a lot of measurements are occurring simultaneously for each service, with complementary dashboards that are logging and recording all those measurements. So you can do your deep dives, go back with, for the last 30 days to see what was going on. We also use BMG a lot for monitoring PTP. So MVRT is looking at the clock chain, and BMG is acquiring PTP and analyzing it, analyzing the PTP itself from a structural point of view. It is dissecting sort of the delay, sync, and announcement messages. It's looking at the accuracy of the time presentation. Again, looking for wild changes in the timing presentation, making sure it's stable. For instance, it's also tracking who the grandmaster is actively. If that changes, if it goes to a backup grandmaster, it will notify us. It tells us who its parent is, so where it's receiving its clock from, in this case from a boundary clock. So it does a lot of detailing of the PTP as well. And again, with BMG and MVRT combined, when you're comparing it to other products, let's say from IT, definitely you wouldn't see this level of detail. Obviously, and you wouldn't probably need to if you didn't have media on your network. But when you have media, the combined strength of having both MVRT and BMG to give you these low-level details, this very accurate representation and analysis of the network and the media services, and tying that together to create that 360-degree view so that you can really pinpoint where the problem lies. Again, you, instead of just finger pointing, you can really find the root cause and solve the root cause, as opposed to spending days to weeks triaging a problem through the party line, sort of passing passing the proverbial buck around to see if someone will fix it for us.
Wow. We do a lot of DirecTV mandates that we keep our video encrypted, or we work with studios where they want their stage feeds encrypted on the network, so someone can't, record some classified information, etc. You can still analyze a transport stream if it's encrypted with Proidium or Verimatrix, right? You just may not be able to view it on the in the thumbnail there.
That's right.
But
That's right.
you can fully, it won't prohibit you from analyzing the
Correct.
transport.
Yeah. The only measurements there that require the content to be in the clear would be the analysis of the essence, so the video and audio and ancillary data. If those are encrypted, it's still able to look at packet timing and structure. It looks for
Yeah,
packet velocity,
yeah,
so
yeah,
jitter, packet
yeah.
interarrival packet time, packet pacing. So it does a lot of measurements that don't necessarily need the content to be decrypted for it to carry out.
So I'm looking like Beck TV that maybe I need to have this in my toolkit. We deploy several IPTV projects a month of various types. Some in government facilities, some in hotels and casinos, media companies, corporations. Um, so can I run it on a notebook computer, or what does it run on Windows Server or
No, it's
Ubuntu?
yeah, great question. It is both applications are Linux based, so
Okay.
they're constructed for Linux. Um, we typically deploy them on server hardware platforms. A Dell R450, for instance, is a starter
Okay.
platform. We can get up into the R650 class, which would be your dual Xeon. If you're going for hundreds of simultaneous services. There are opportunities depending on the project and scale. Like we talked with BMG Lite, that isn't a
Yeah.
product that's intended for smaller platform. So that could be something a bit smaller.
Yeah,
And
I mean, VidOvation does SMPTE 2110, but where we uh we went to a government facility, we show up on site, they don't even have IT in the building. They sub it out to a contractor who was physically not present. We couldn't get anyone on the phone. We were text messaging and emailing, trying to deploy an IPT system. We could have accelerated the process, help them to figure out what switches weren't set right, if we had a tool like yours. So it's not, we would put the VidOvation, the customer would buy this server and permanently install. It's not really a portable solution for when you're on the road. Well, I could ship a server to the job site to help me with this analysis and configuration when I'm rolling out. Is that kind of how Beck uses it? They bring it out while they're deploying, and then the intention is to leave it behind.
right. Yeah. Yeah. So in that, for instance, yes. And it is sort of, it's kind of transferred over to the client, and then they, are able to take advantage of it, as you mentioned, especially for teams that don't have an IT, member on staff, or
Yeah,
there's a big disconnect there. So this gives them
yeah.
insight into the operation. So
Or I just bundle it in, like if I sense that this customer X is going to need extra help,
yeah.
I need extra eyes on the network. I need better network visibility. Um, Here's another question. Do you get pushback ever from IT, giving you the API access to all the switch hardware? Is that a challenge, or do you find, you tell them it's read only, you tell them it's secure? Um, how do we present that to IT so we get them, obviously if they say no, then it's a non-starter, right? Um,
Yeah, so for MVRT, you just hit it on the head. You do require some access to the switch. It is a read only. It effectively is streaming from the switch side. it's well documented, and we work closely with the switch manufacturer, so they always provide
Yeah. So you're
services.
certified. You know, most of my customers are using Cisco. That's the
Yeah.
brand of choice. So Cisco
It,
certified. And does the customer log in the credentials, or do we have to get, you know, I'm just thinking chain of command, you know, a security chain, you know, if somebody's, you know, got to give me credentials, how do you handle that chain of access? What's that process look like?
Yeah, so for MVRT, when you set up the interface to the switch, like the create that telemetry, typically there's a credential that's the username and password protected. So when you're logged in as the administrator into MVRT and you create that first initial connection, you would enter the credentials assigned from the switch side into the software. That creates the unlock. Any subsequent logins by non-admin users are never going to see that side of it. So the telemetry would
Yeah.
already be set up. They'd be getting the dashboards. They wouldn't see
Okay.
how MVRT is, what the passwords were that were used to
Okay.
unlock it.
So some senior manager in InfoSec would be given admin access to NVRT, BMG. Then they would do a network discovery. They would put their credentials in, and then they can set up lower level users. They can, in fact, even lock us out if they wanted to, right?
That's right.
You know, they don't want the vendor having full access. So okay, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
I could see IT buying into that. And
Yeah.
then do customers usually make you do a trial like in a lab first, you know, before,
Sure.
is that typical?
Yeah, yeah, we have a lot of a lot of clients that we work with. We go through a POC first with them, and they qualify it on a lab system before they deploy it in production. Um, I should know too, in terms of the security login, just as you were mentioning it, I thought of it. It's a new feature that we'll have in the next release. Will be SAML2 support, so you'll be able to build the single sign-on style logins. So
Oh,
that
awesome.
that 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 takes us out of the critical path, right? We're not storing passwords
Yeah.
and logins. You're using your own authentication
Yeah.
services. So that's
Yeah.
somewhat of a
I
prerequisite for some of our clients, for sure, with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
bigger
no, that
enterprises.
is very common, you know, authenticating single sign-on or dual authentication. And because cell phones can be cloned now, many organizations don't allow authentication via text message anymore, SMS. You know, you need to use, my big thing. I'm sure you guys run the same thing. Okay, I need to get into this computer or this website or this asset. Which authenticating app goes with this? You got to, you know, this one uses Semantic VIP. This one uses Duo. This one uses Okta. But it's
Right,
the new normal, right? We got to deal with all that. So,
right. Yeah, yeah.
would Active Directory apply, or that would be getting too into the weeds? Like you know, if we put this on the enterprise, could we tie into Active Directory to give those employees, those IT people, access that way? Is that
Yeah,
a feature?
yeah. So yeah, so SAML2, um, LDAP, Active Directory, yeah, the idea of radius service. So the idea of a authentication entity that you would use instead of us doing self verification. So the principle behind it is that the MVRT or BMG are not storing passwords or users. It's transferring the session to
Well,
the
that's perfect.
authentication.
That's perfect. And then there's no log. You know, it's transparent. You're tying into the company network as any other asset on the network.
Right.
No, very
Exactly.
cool, very cool. Yeah, I see quite a few people still on the line. Yeah, you know, webinars, they say, you know, the ideal is 30 minutes, and
Hmm.
I've never done one less than an hour, but
Right.
um I think you answered most of my questions. Did I interrupt you? You know, did you cover everything you needed to cover as far as the demo?
We did, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a lot to go through, and like you said, a short, even though an hour seems like, well, quite a long time, it's quite short trying to get through
Yeah,
everything.
we could go on for days, right?
So
I
yeah,
have a
so
ton more applications that, you know, networks. you know, and it's a sensitive subject too. Like customers don't want to hear that their network might have a problem.
Right.
So you know, you got to be politically correct about it. And you know, deep discussion I had with a customer recently, you know, we both agreed there is no real smoking gun on either side. Neither one of us have the clear picture of what is happening, and I can't wait to deploy a tool like this to try to shed some light on that. Uh, um, so yeah, so you guys are in Central Hall, C1806. You
That's
guys
right.
will have a full demo running in your booth.
Yep.
You can come to the VidOvation booth. We're in West Hall, W2230. We'll talk about the product. We'll have like a promo loop, but either case, you know, go to the Providius booth or the VidOvation booth. Be sure to mention you saw the webinar, and
Yes.
we'd love to help stop that finger pointing, right? We need to solve the problem. It's no one's fault. We just need to figure out, hey, maybe it is a hardware problem. Maybe it is the media encoder. I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe my
Right.
COM 3000 is not set right, and it's the IGMP joins are not authenticating properly.
Right.
Let's figure that out, right?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head, right? Both products support a couple of different phases, and the first phase would be initial deployment and building up the network. So just having that capability to you know, investigate, interrogate what's going on is super powerful. It just speeds up delivery, and everyone wants things installed now. They don't want to wait. They don't want that 2, 3, 4 week delay. So this will just help keep things rolling in the right direction and get that project completed on time. So that's
Yeah.
the first phase. Second phase is, as I mentioned, you know, the network is a dynamic place, and it's forever changing and evolving, and it does so almost on, you know, at any second, right? So
Every
having insight
millisecond.
into the operation of your network will help you detect those changes that may now be impacting your media services. Like we always say, you don't want the intended customers, right? Whether it's a casino or a venue, an IPTV system, the digital signage, you don't want them saying, well, that's weird, we can't read this signage, or the, you know, the video service in this suite is not working. You know, you'd rather catch that yourself and then be able to deal
Yeah,
with
be
it before it becomes.
proactive. You know, I think you got a cabling problem on port 32 on switch 32, you know, to give them that smoking gun. And senior management just doesn't, you know, they don't care how the sausage is made. They just want it to work.
Right.
And then if one department's pointing at the other department, management's like, you both stink. Get out of here. Get out of my
Yeah.
office. Just make it
Right.
work.
Right.
I don't care.
Exactly.
I don't care.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, guys. This was really
Thank
great.
you.
This is really good stuff. Everyone be sure to visit Providius at NAB, visit VidOvation. It takes about a week-ish, sometimes less. We'll take this recording, VidOvation, with Fallon's help and Cindy's help. We transcribe everything. We edit the video. So it should be up inside of a week, and it's free for everyone to download. So if you want to learn more about Providius, you can visit the VidOvation website or go to Providius directly.
Yes.
So thanks, Rodrick. Thanks, Jamie. Good luck with the rest of your NAB plans.
Likewise.
Thank you.
I need to fill out my internet form for NAB. I was waiting. So good luck with everything, and I hope to see you guys there. Sometimes
Yeah.
we're in different halls too. So I mean, if a customer comes to our booth and really wants to do a deeper dive, of course we'll send them over to see you guys. So safe travels. Have a great show, and I'll see you in Vegas.
Yeah,
Hope to
sounds
see you in
good.
Vegas.
Thanks,
Jim.
Fallon.
Thanks,
Take care,
Fallon.
guys.
Jim, thanks, Fallon. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everyone.
Okay.